What's going on, Clarence?
Cornmeal.
Let's do it. D-Man alright. D-Man alright. Spicy Mafia. Spicy Mafia. You gotta keep it spicy. If you see a queen, you better wife it. While we litter than a lighter, makes things much brighter. So you gotta keep it spicy.
All right, so this is always a special treat for me. I'm sort of Vin's friendly pest online. Whenever I can find an excuse to get him to come on the podcast, hey Vin, oxygen. We're talking about oxygen. You breathe oxygen, right? Come on, let's talk about anything I can. Any excuse, any pretext to get Vin on the show. I try and do. And right now we're going through a global apocalyptic pandemic. So who better to have on the show to sort it all out for us in a tidy 30 minutes? Can't go over. Hard out, Vin. Hard out.
Okay. I don't know if I can do it.
Is the great Vin Armani. Before we get into all that, thank you so much, man, for taking some time out and joining us.
Oh, my pleasure. Always a pleasure.
Very cool. So right off the bat, I noticed you're taking this extremely seriously. Now, I don't know anybody who's not, but this being what we'll loosely call Rona, and all she implies, and you indirectly, sort of tangentially linked it to cryptocurrency, and you posted almost cryptically about some JavaScript and libraries and kind of sort of getting your coding house in order. Can you take us a little bit through of your thinking and kind of where you are headspace wise as to why maybe you're pushing out projects a little bit faster than you might have otherwise?
Yeah, so it's very controversial to, I think, talk about the virus portion of this thing, and I think it's also probably inconsequential at the end of the day. Even if this were to be a true global health crisis, and even if it were to kill, more people than the flu kills every year, I think this flu season we're talking somewhere in the range of about 400,000 people globally who died from the flu since October. Which coronavirus is not even close at this point. Even if it were to get to that point, and even if it were to greatly surpass it, I think that would be a lot less consequential than and it would just be speculation right now, right? And a lot of fear. But one thing that is for sure, 100%, especially at the place that we've reached, is there is a global economic crisis that has begun. It's begun. There's no way to stop it. Even if all the lockdowns were to be released tomorrow, which they are not, even if they were to be released next month, which they are not, or the month after, which they are not, the economic consequences would be dire. And I think it's really beyond dire, and I think it's at a point where we might say unprecedented. I've used the term the end of an age. I think that the world as we know it has officially come to an end. Doesn't mean that the world has ended, but I believe that this is the fall of a paradigm, of a culture, probably equivalent to the fall of Rome. And it, at least for the people living inside the Roman Empire. And I think with as broad of consequences for the future, or perhaps even broader. And the changes to the economic paradigm that are coming are going to surprise people. I don't think people are quite prepared for everything that's coming. I don't think that people are paying attention to the things that are absolutely being rolled out. Probably the most significant for me is the U.S. digital dollar being written into this stimulus bill in the United States. I think that's probably the most significant economic thing that has happened since probably since the U.S. went off the gold standard. Maybe even more so. Maybe the most in the last, I don't know, probably maybe the last 300 years. And what it means for the future of commerce, what it means for the future of human rights, what it means for my children, and what their life is going to be like is absolutely significant. And Bitcoin has taken on an entirely new meaning. It's the meaning. It's something that I've understood that Bitcoin was. I thought we probably had a little longer than this. I thought that, what I and others were doing was maintaining something, a tool that, generations forward we're going to need, but it looks like it's going to be crucial for our generation, and we're the caretakers and the keepers of something very, very crucial to, I think, to the future path that humanity is going to take.
And the digital dollar portion of stimulus, though, just to be clear, the U.S. House now is in deliberations, and I believe there's going to be a vote. From my understanding, it's pro forma tomorrow, which would be Friday, the 27th of March. If you're listening to this shortly after, so maybe people will already know the outcome. It's a $2 trillion stimulus package. My understanding is that the digital dollar was written in sort of taking language from Rashida Tlaib's the 2 platinum coins idea, and then I believe it was subsequently stricken, but I could be wrong about that. But it's there. It's about as mainstream as you can get in terms of reaching the halls of Congress. Do you really think they're gonna somehow fold that in by Friday?
I don't know that it's necessary that the digital dollar bill or the language has to be in there. I think that's the less consequential aspect. I think the consequential aspect was that it was even added in the first place, because it does speak to the recognition at very high levels of a fundamental problem with the road that they're going down. And it basically comes down to this: they can't cut everybody a check in the way that checks to be, that I know checks to be, because there is even if 10% of the people went to cash these checks, there would be no paper money left to cash these checks. There is not enough money, especially now that people have gone to the banks and started to hoard cash. There is not enough paper money to cash checks. And so what this means is that there is going to need to be some new form of currency that is completely digital, that cannot be exchanged for paper US dollars. And this is the idea and the understanding that that even spurred this first sort of trial balloon, if you will, draft, whatever it is, to say we need to have a US digital dollar, which is something different than a US dollar. And that's crucially important.
It's sort of strange to now. So the old trope in American politics is there's something about the new president that makes you long for his predecessor, even though you disliked him intensely before. There's something to that with regard to the U.S. dollar. So even though it's kind of a meaningless, just to be glib, piece of paper, at least there was something physical there. It's so hard to even say this with a straight face, but there was something physical there. Now with the digital dollar, that disappears, whatever psychological comfort that brings us, and we move fully into the digital age. But your point isn't about fractional reserve banking. Your point really isn't so much even about what I just said. This at least with the physical paper, I guess theoretically, you could walk into a Chinese bank or whatever, the central bank of
Yes.
ECB, and
Yes.
see stacks of paper, theoretically.
Yes.
Now, if this switches over in the way that you're sort of implying, that is moot, and
Yes.
it also avails a new kind of surveillance state. Am I getting close to what you're hinting at?
I think you're getting very close, but perhaps not still capturing the Orwellian nature of this all. So, and maybe it's to take it to Bitcoin, and a sentence in the introduction that I constantly point out to, especially maximalists on the BTC side, who want to talk about, that the point of Bitcoin is to replace fiat, is to replace the US dollar. The last sentence of the first paragraph of the introduction, first page of the Bitcoin white paper, after basically Satoshi lays out the reason or the problems with a trusted third party being involved in commerce on the internet. So the first sentence is, commerce on the internet has come to rely almost exclusively on financial institutions serving as trusted third parties to process electronic payments. He then goes on to say the problems. He does it in a very apolitical way, which is good. But I think hidden in there, the fact that he doesn't bring up some of the issues with third parties that are more egregious and malicious and related to the state speaks to the fact that he understood them quite well. But the last sentence, he says, these costs and payment uncertainties, the problems that he's described, can be avoided in person by using physical currency, but no mechanism exists to make payments over a communications channel without a trusted third party. So now, physical currency, even Satoshi is saying, that is the escape hatch. That is the thing that is preventing everything from getting tyrannical. And there's been drives for a cashless society. And places like India have simply gone to remove cash, physical paper, from circulation. But still
demonetization, right, of the smaller bills.
But still continue to use the same denomination. What we're going to be stepping into is we're going to actually be stepping into a dual currency economy. US dollars will still exist, but these funds that are going to be delivered to individuals are not going to be exchangeable for those. They're going to be exchangeable for goods and services, probably from a limited number of suppliers of those goods and services. Think Amazon, Walmart, the big boys. And you will be able to use them for that, but you will probably not be able to use them for peer-to-peer transfer. So there will not be some sort of facility where I can take my card, just in the same way that this is true with, let's say, like EBT, right? Or Snap or Wick. I can't take my EBT balance and move it onto your card. So I can't do a peer-to-peer electronic cash transfer to you if I'm using EBT. And so as we see these payouts rolled out, there's every reason to believe, and certainly no reason to believe that anything otherwise would happen, that it's going to be something like an expansion of the EBT system that already exists. And that it will not be exchangeable for cash. You can't take your EBT card that's got Snap or Wick or whatever these other government benefits are and go to an ATM and pull out cash. And as a matter of fact, if you trade, and this is common, if you say, hey man, I'll buy you $30 worth of groceries if you'll give me a $20 bill, that's actually a federal crime. That's actually fraud. And so we're coming into a situation where the introduction of this is going to happen, and it's not even that you're going to need a quote-unquote cashless society where you're going to need to do demonetization of paper currency. It's just that you are going to have a critical mass, an ever increasing critical mass of individuals, because there will be no economic activity, who are within this new system. And these people, these are internal credits to the United States. And we'll see this also in Europe if we don't see it country by country in Europe. And you can do things inside the United States. Maybe you'll be able to pay your rent, but only from certain landlords, like Section 8 style or whatever, right? So you're going to have this second class of citizens that you certainly won't be able to travel. You won't be able to buy airline tickets with this. You'll be able to buy goods, and maybe it's even just within your state. And everything else is going to be black market and under the table. And I don't see how that is not the system that is on the way. Not because of anything nefarious, not because of anything other than the fact that these systems are already in place.
I'm glad you're saying
and it's going to be much easier to expand them. It's just logic. Much easier to expand EBT, which already exists, than it's going to be to start some weird, let's cut everybody a check program. That's not going to happen. It's not going to happen that way.
Yeah, I'm glad you put the final little piece of stink on there about you don't need the bad actors. You don't need the black helicopters.
No.
You don't need any of that to sort of follow, sort of the chain of your thinking. It doesn't exclude them necessarily. It just sure. it doesn't. I think that's an important point to get across to people, because I think immediately as they hear us talking, they're thinking, oh man, come on, this, But if you just sort of work through the logical implications of I guess kind of the natural instinct of government, so it doesn't need to. We don't need to, label them as anything more than, what they are, which is the monopoly on violence, and how they, so they see this crisis, right? That people scream to them to do something. They want to be seen as doing something. And you have essentially two poles of acceptable opinion, right? We do something, 30% of the way, or we do something 60% of the way, or however, 55 to 60 or whatever. And then that's the debate. In other words, the people who are saying maybe we shouldn't do anything and kind of let the market work itself out they're not even part of that discussion. And so you just sort of watch these natural poles, these unnatural poles, these manufactured poles do their thing. You get the Bernie, just to be stereotypical, you get the Bernie Sanders of the world, who is very hard when you're in that world to argue against. He's like, look, we can find trillions at the drop of a hat to, go for foreign adventurism and bomb ancient cultures for 20 years. Why can't we find trillions for healthcare, right? So I personally find both ideas wrong, but if you're in Bernie's world, it's hard to counter that, it's hard to go, well, no, Bernie's making a good point here. On the other end, there are people who are saying you're now going to disincentivize people in terms of work or whatever, and they have this sort of strange debate between them that never considers non-intervention. So by definition, they're going to have to do something. So that's where, you start to get these digital dollar proposals, like you say, and you have all these natural constituencies within government that will seize on that and see the benefits of it. But that tiered system, I had not considered. So,
well, the thing is, Edward, it exists. It exists
right.
already. Like, I'm not talking. That's the thing. This is not like some David Icke, Alex Jones. I'm not suggesting to you that lizard people are going to come down and create some new system, or that there's some secret system in the background. There's hundreds of thousands, if not millions, of people who are using these EBT cards today.
Right.
At the grocery store near you, if you are in the U.S., or some other similar system in other modern nations. And these are bureaucracies. They have a solution already of how do we get benefits to people who need benefits. They have a system in place. It's a system that scales. It's already in all of these locations where people would need to go where they're already shopping for food. It already has rules. It already has policies. It already has procedures. It's a very, very clear how this is going to roll out. The tiered system where you are, it's a different type. We have a 2-currency system already. And those EBT cards will only buy you certain goods and services.
I'm just embarrassed to say that I've never thought of it that way. You're 1,000% right. I've just never thought of it that way. It's a closed permission system. Now, if you do get cash aid, and I don't want to get too far into this, I don't want to lose people here, but if you do get cash aid, you can off-ramp that into the mainstream economy through just pulling it out, I guess, and paying your rent cash, or doing whatever you want to do with it in cash. But I get the other parts make a lot of sense, and if you eliminate sort of the cash part of that equation, then you can insist that, okay, these digital dollar credits, this percentage goes for rent, this goes for, you can start to do the easy math there. So you've done it. The implications, I think, are somewhat obvious, but how crypto in 11 years now, I think it's safe for me to say, has been somewhat disappointing on the adoption front. Does this spur more interest into cryptocurrencies? Well, I'll let you just answer from there.
Well, I think let's talk about a system where there is just not cash on the street.
Mm-hmm.
It's just not there. Like, paper money is just not there.
Sweden?
Well, no. I mean, even that you could not convert your funds that you have into a type of paper money.
Gotcha.
Where there is no mechanism for peer-to-peer exchange of currency. Where even if I wanted to, you're sitting there and I couldn't have economic activity with you. That's what we're moving into. Where you and I cannot have, where I can't sell you my car. That's what we're moving into. Now, I could go to a dealership and sell it at a dealership who are authorized to pay me in these credits.
Approved vendors, yeah.
Approved vendors. And we're already seeing these public-private partnerships. That's over and over and over. We're already seeing the governments and major corporations, doing like that's the winners. Walmart winning. Amazon, oh my God, I don't know what this quarter is going to look like for them. This is probably their greatest quarter ever.
Mm-hmm.
And no competition. You've shut down everybody else. It's as close to fascism as you could possibly get, like, just from a straight definitional standpoint. I'm not trying to make some like qualitative moral statement about it. But like, for people who, from a political theory idea, like, we're really talking about fascism here. A lot of that is taking place. And so Bitcoin was always meant to solve a problem. And Satoshi himself, as I've read to you, like, acknowledged that paper currency was able to solve that problem. But he says no mechanism exists to make payments over a communications channel without a trusted third party. If all there is in terms of payments is communication channels, because there is no physical currency, I mean, people will choose to will find some physical currency, right? People will barter. They'll do all kinds of economic activity in that way. Yeah. Of course, people will find a way, but that can't scale. And so I think that there's going to be a place. I think that we're probably going back to a time of Bitcoin being considered a black market thing. I think that's coming probably pretty quick. You would need to, actually, if you were really going to implement this type of thing. There also might be a chance that it's just sort of gets ignored for a while. And I think that there is going to be great opportunity, certainly if you still want to do global trade of any kind, that this may turn out to be the only way to do it. And I think that we're going to have a renaissance. We may actually lose a lot of interest initially in Bitcoin. I think Ethereum's dead. I think it's over for Ethereum.
Really, I don't
Yeah.
see that. So why explain that a little bit?
Well, Ethereum has been looking for what is its thing, right? It clearly wasn't ICOs. The state shut that down. If you think that in the midst of this new economic reset that DeFi is going to be allowed to exist, you got another thing coming. And people that DeFi has been it is the use for Ethereum at this point and stable coins. Beyond that, there's nothing. And I mean, while stable coins are interesting, and while they're going to be useful in the short term, I just don't think that that's going to be enough to sustain, especially in a more black market environment. I don't think that's going to be enough to sustain very many of these networks. And, I honestly, and maybe I'm biased, but I think Bitcoin, and specifically Bitcoin Cash, the way that it's evolved is what's set up, if I'm right about what's coming, is what's set up to actually have a massive impact over decades.
Interesting. And so that was a long way to go to get into why you're moving a little quicker here. What are some of the projects with regard to peer-to-peer electronic cash that you see having sort of the greater emphasis right now, shorter term, and then maybe longer term?
So I have been working on several things in the background for the last year. I've put out various different parts and pieces as I could, primarily focused around the idea of collaborative transactions. So this is something that, and as I say, it's the way that Bitcoin Cash has evolved, that the nature of Bitcoin transactions has always been such that since they have multiple inputs and multiple outputs, there's always been the capability for multiple parties to participate. Well, we know that multiple parties can participate as recipients. We know that already, right? So even if you just do a normal transaction, you send it to the person and then you send it back to a new address as change. Your wallet does that automatically. So most transactions that you're doing out of most wallets are going to have at least two outputs. If you do it out of a wallet like CoinText, it is most likely going to have three, because you're also going to send a fee. We know that exchanges, if people have looked when they've received from an exchange like a Bitfinex or something like that, that they might see that they are one of 80 outputs, that they batched the transaction and sent them all at one time. Right. And your payment went along with, let's say, 80 other payments. So I think we're pretty clear and we understand that with Bitcoin, at least, and this is something Bitcoin specific, that there can be multiple recipients. But what's never really been explored is there can be multiple inputs as well. So there can be multiple people paying in. It's just that there have not been, as of yet, until quite recently, much of a reason for people to collaborate on transactions. And so I released the SLP postage protocol. This is an exploration of that. It's something that does that, where someone's an SLP token holder. They want to send some SLP tokens. They need some BCH, but they don't have any BCH. So they collaborate with a post office server that adds on those little BCH stamps, I call them. And this person who's got the SLP token pays the postage server in that SLP token. So that's a first collaborative token or collaborative transaction. Another, I released a library called Jeton Lib. It's basically, and online we've done some like little experimental sports wagering. So that would be another example. Using opcheck datasig, which is one of the Bitcoin Cash exclusive opcodes to do escrow with an oracle. Basically what you're able to do is I say, I'm going to put in $1 into this input. You say you're going to put in $1 into this input, and whoever wins gets to take the $2. So that's another collaborative one. And then go ahead. Did you want to say something?
Well, yeah, so the collaborative nature of it helps to obscure um, the transaction history, right?
No, it actually helps to make it trustless.
Okay.
Because if you're contributing and I'm contributing, and the transaction goes through, and we've both been able to look at the transaction, we have to have been able to sign it and say, okay, yes, we're good with it. If it goes through, we both get our funds. If for some reason it doesn't, it's double spent, it's not broadcast, whatever, no harm, no foul. It's not like I send you some SLP tokens and then I have to wait for you to send me back some BCH. It's done in one single transaction, so we don't have to trust each other. And the same situation with the betting. And then the third situation, which has now come up with this Flip Starter project, is you can also use this for crowdfunding. So you can have multiple people who all say, let's say that you want to crowdfund for 10 BCH, and you've got the transaction sitting there. I can say, oh yeah, I'll fund that, but my UTXO will only get spent if it actually gets up to that total of 10 BCH. So you can use it for crowdfunding, right? So these are three. I've been working for the last year on protocols to do this and trying to do it with intermediary servers and all kinds of things. And then in February, I did a fast, a 3-day fast, and was on a walk during that time, and just like a bolt of lightning was hit with, no, here's how you could do it completely peer-to-peer, on-chain, and the parties don't need anything else but a connection to the Bitcoin Cash blockchain. And so since that time, I was able to grab some sort of existing protocols and code that was out there and modify it and work on it. And so end to end, I have those three applications working now, and I'm literally drafting up the protocol as we speak. So I've been working on that this past week. It'll probably take me another week, and I'm going to be releasing the protocol and code. But in the meantime, one of the little pieces of it, which is end-to-end encryption, that I had worked on and put together during that time to use in this new protocol, it seemed like the appropriate time because it enabled on-chain, completely end-to-end encrypted communication between addresses. It seemed like the appropriate time to put that out, especially now. So I just released that as its own little thing.
Yeah, it struck me. I was like, he's finding a way to kind of people who've done prison time. I've heard them say, don't let the time do you. You do the time. So when you find yourself in a super serious situation, I don't think too many people can relate to being in a global pandemic, but in essence, and being locked down, and maybe the greater implications of that, if it's possible to think them through to any degree, this is sort of the best time to kind of think about those things and why it's important to innovate on that end, and maybe even a little faster. You mentioned Flip Starter, and Flip Starter was a reaction to the infrastructure funding plan for Bitcoin Cash, the IFP, sort of the notorious, controversy, the debate we're actually still having within the Bitcoin Cash community. I saw you come out and say it was a creative idea at first. I don't think you full-throatedly endorsed it, but you felt like there was some interesting points to be made in its favor. And then I saw you kind of back off because this is, again, from my point of view, looking at it, not you. You sort of backed off of the debate so much as just kind of saying, there's more heat than there is light here. I'm going to let you fellows work this out. And I haven't heard much about the debate from really anybody on any side. I know the Bitcoin Cash node guys, BCH node guys are still hot and heavy and working through some things, but I haven't really heard your take now, a few weeks out from its proposal and all the different developments. that we've been cataloging at CoinSpice. Where are you now with IFP specifically, and then maybe protocol funding in general for Bitcoin Cash as we head into the scheduled upgrade?
So I'll take the second part first. My feelings on the IFP have not changed one bit. They've been the same. And from the beginning, my feeling is, and I've expressed this many times, if you look at the incentives, the idea that the people who make the software that is used by miners to mine and receive block rewards would make their living from block rewards seems to me to be perfectly aligned incentives. So in other words, it's something like the person that makes the tools that a miner uses to mine gold, that they would be paid in gold that was mined by those miners, seems to me perfectly aligned incentives.
Gotcha.
That's always been my feeling. So when I heard that here's this idea for a proposal where the guys who build the shovels that the miners use to mine gold are going to be paid in gold mined by the miners using the shovels, I said, well, that's a foregone conclusion. If Bitcoin is to grow to any significant level, that will happen. Presumably, it should be happening at between CoinGeek and nChain on Bitcoin SV, except they're mining at a loss, right? So presumably, if that was a profitable mining operation, that's exactly what would be happening at nChain and CoinGeek.
That's a really interesting point.
And fundamentally, that's what's been happening because, as far as I know, all of Bitcoin ABC's funding has primarily come from the miners. So in my mind, this was something that was already occurring. This was just an innovation in terms of removing, in terms of basically solidifying it into, if you will, the protocol itself. I've thought that the arguments that it somehow changes the incentives or anything like that are asinine, not well thought through, and I think mostly political pearl clutching for the most part. But in terms of the actual specific proposal, my opinion on it has always been the same, and that is this is between the miners who are using the software to mine and the developers of the software. If the miners who are using the software to mine don't want to run this software or don't want to run this particular version of the software, then they won't. And if they do, they will. And if there's 51% of the hash that wants to run it and everybody else is following the longest chain, then it's in. And if there isn't, then it's not. And there was not really anything more for me to say about it.
Right. It was sort of self-evident. So now we're at where we're at. It looks like at least the initial mining pool that proposed it has backed off. Where do you think we go from here?
Well, I'll just do my classic self right now. I had actually described this to several people, including to Amaury Sachet, as a Kadesh Barnea moment. So in the Old Testament, the Israelites are, they didn't have to spend all that time in the wilderness. There was a moment when they came to this place, Kadesh Barnea, and Moses sent out basically 12 spies, they're described as, I guess, in the English translations. But they were 12 princes of the tribes into the Holy Land. And he said, find out, is the land good? Can we conquer the people? Like, what's going on? What's the deal? And two of them came back, Joshua and Caleb, if I'm not mistaken, came back and said, it's good, man. The land is like overflowing with trees and great farmland, and we can take these people, we can attack them, no problem. And the other 10 were like, oh no, the people there are giants, we'll never be able to take them, they're too strong, we'll never be able to do it. And Moses didn't go. He didn't go in. And as this was going on, I told many people, I said, this is a Kadesh Barnea moment. And what I see, quote unquote, the majority, the 10 princes, saying, oh, we can't possibly do this. We can't possibly do this. It's too much. It's too scary. We're not prepared for this. It's going to change everything. And so I think now we are relegated to the wilderness, quite frankly. I think that the timing was there. There was a grand opportunity to try something innovative. There was an opportunity to trust in individuals who had thus far led us through the wilderness pretty good on many occasions. But instead, the politics, the desire to settle old scores, and granted, it's not like Omri has helped himself in that regard. He brought those conflicts, personal conflicts, which is what most of it was, onto himself. So he's as much to blame for an innovative and potentially moving and stepping into the promised land. He's as much to blame for us not moving into the promised land and us being in the wilderness. But the hopeful part about that story is that, God was very unhappy with all of that. And he said that all of those people were going to die, all those 10 princes. But those 2, Joshua and Caleb, were going to live to see the Holy Land. And the book says that they did. So I think there's hope for those who keep the faith at this point in time, who see Bitcoin for what it is, who are not dissuaded by that, and who believe that we can be sustainable, who believe that we can be a force for good. Those are the people who are going to live to carry us into the promised land. But I think all of those people who see Bitcoin as something else, and perhaps a place for them to expand on their own personal fears and preferences and play out their own little personal shenanigans, as opposed to a tool and a force for good that we've been given the opportunity to be caretakers of and builders of, to help grow, so that it's there to help us through these very dark times that are coming. Those people, I think, should be relegated to the fact that it's going to be a damn wilderness for them coming up. But those of us who are builders, and those of us who have known that this is a multi-generational project and who are going to be a part of it, I think that we are going to be able to push through. We'll have to be in the wilderness too for a little while, but we've got the hope that we're going to see the promised land.
The great, the unbelievably provocative Vin Armani. For people who want to follow your work, who want to keep up with your thoughts and all that you're doing, how can they do that?
Until I am kicked off the platform, Twitter is probably the best place. At Vin Armani. I think I may have maybe I've got a few months on there still before they kick me off. I haven't been too bad in terms of breaking what I think are their new rules. So at Vin Armani on Twitter is probably the best place. Very good. Well, it's always a treat, man. It's always fantastic to listen to you. You riff on these issues, and I always walk away, dazed and muttering to myself for a good few hours after we talk, trying to sort it all out. So thanks so much again for coming on, man. And we are rooting for you. Yeah, I appreciate it, man. I'm rooting for all of us. I think we have a great chance right now.